Okay, I think we'll call this meeting to order. The June 12th, 2012 meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. We are streaming live. We've been working on different layouts so we can have a little more conversational tone than sitting behind a panel like that. But we may keep working on this since this feels a little weird too. I think we have minutes, but I guess we're not really ready to adopt them.
We're not. No, I posted them, Mr. Chairman, this morning late. I don't think everybody's had a chance to read them, so I'm going to post them in draft form.
Okay.
And then we'll approve them with the meeting minutes of this meeting next week.
Okay. I just had one thing, as long as we're talking about it. On page 2,
right.
It said Chairman Crosby asked if the commission is bound by state policies with regard to vacation and other policies, or if the commission has discretion. We don't really answer. I think the answer is we have discretion, but we don't really answer it. It seems like it's an interesting enough question that we ought to maybe answer it in the minutes. Sort of like.
Well, all right. I'll check, Mr. Chairman,
that.
And see whether we answered it at the meeting.
Okay,
and
maybe
if they did, the minutes will reflect the answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Thank you. Administration, executive search. Anything new to report, Commissioner?
No, there's nothing new to report. Responses are due tomorrow by 4 o'clock, I believe. And we answered and posted the questions that we received by the deadline, which was last Friday.
Right.
They were posted on Compass and our website.
And no, do we have any in yet, or?
No, nothing in yet. People usually
wait until
the last minute.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Right. Okay. Great. Fingers crossed. If you don't get any, you're going to be the executive director.
We'll have to go to Plan B.
Okay. On additional hires, there were several things hanging out there. One was interns. Were you going to do something on interns, or we had just decided we would get interns if and as we need them?
Yes, I believe that the decision was to also subject to figuring out and finalizing the question of background checks. But
right.
We have drafted the general obligations or general tasks that an intern would have, and part of the question to this commission is if we think that we can keep somebody occupied for a portion of the work week. I think that's plenty. So
okay.
We should move with one position.
And I know Elaine has talked about looking for people to help her too. Do we have any other needs? Do we have an interest? I've got some sources too. Do we want to start a flow of interns coming in for interviews, or do we really not have the needs at this point? Well, besides the one.
My suggestion would be to start with one as a way to figure out how we work with somebody in terms of assigning tasks,
okay.
etc. But of course, time relative to the summer internship is running.
Yeah,
running tight.
Right. Okay.
Well, I would like to put in the pipeline, and I don't know if we can get one now. To find a co-op student from one of the a legal co-op student from one of the law schools around town, whether it be Northeastern or one of the other programs. There is a fair amount of work now, and once the summer begins to move forward, and not too distant future, we're going to be in the process of dealing with regulations, and I'd very much like to have some bright person helping with the reviewing and proofreading right. and organizing of all that, plus some of the other things that I think we could use some help on. So I'd like to put that in the pipeline.
Great.
Yeah,
we can make a note of that, and we can start that. Yeah.
As Enrique mentioned, we have one candidate, and we wanted to make the intern experience worth their time as well as ours, and make sure they knew what their responsibilities were going to be, so that they weren't sitting in the office yelling at us if they didn't want to make copies. But we've pretty much told them, whoever he or she is, that it's going to be all hands on deck for a while. But I think, most of the colleges have already let out for the summer. I don't know if that's different with the co-op students, but
they may
should
have.
begin.
They may have already gone.
Lining it up for the fall.
Yeah, we could at least get in the pipeline for the fall. Yeah,
yep.
Right.
And try our hand at one for the rest of the summer and see how it goes.
Right.
Okay, great. The project management facility, where are you in that process?
I propose that we schedule one or more demonstrations on some of the software that's out there.
Right.
I came to learn that some of the tools that I am familiar with relative to project management tool have a next generation, given the technology, where it may be really incumbent upon this commission to study, mostly because they've become more of a graphic planning tools rather than very methodical databases, which is the generation that I'm familiar with. So my, still, all of that is still in the background of those tools. My suggestion to this commission is that we schedule a couple of those demonstrations and start getting familiar as to what tools could be available for us there.
And use the demonstrations as the medium by which we would select a firm or a person? Does the software go with a firm?
Well, there's different options out there. Essentially, we would be in a request for information mode, as really understanding what best tools may be out there. There are, I'm sure there's options of getting licenses for using a tool or a number of licenses. There's also options relative to having a firm or a project management firm help with management of those tools, right, to study as to what is the best approach. But in my mind, we should have the preliminary step, which is just get information as to what kind of resources are out there. And I can schedule that in very short order.
Okay.
Really within the next couple of days.
Okay, good. Well, let's try to do that, because I think we all feel the need to get moving on this.
Mhm.
And every day that goes by, we're deeper into the process, and it's going to be that much more retrofitting.
Right. I will note that I have now installed in my computer Microsoft Project, and I have started entering the major milestones of what we envision. These are really a broad schedule at this point. I am told that many of these tools, and I believe whatever we end up getting would be directly transferable or uploadable, could be uploaded into other tools. So
Okay.
I've started to make progress relative to scheduling that master schedule that we've talked about.
Okay, good. All right, so we'll see folks' demonstrations as quickly as we can.
Yes.
And I don't think we have to all be involved in that, but it's probably a training session, but,
Yes.
but as many as possible. Certainly Jim, I think, would like to be involved in that, and I. Okay. Anything else you look like you're thinking about?
Well, I was just wondering if we want to get a tool before we decide what kind of an approach we're going to take to the project management. In other words, we put on the table the last time the possibility of getting a temp from one of the technical staffing agencies, or getting a firm to manage it, or hiring someone. To what extent are those three options and the tool we ultimately use interdependent? And if they are interdependent, does it make sense to get the tool before we get before we decide on the mechanism, on the methodology for managing the project?
I think it's a very relevant question, which we should study. From my perspective, getting a temp was more dependent on the tool. When I spoke to some of the staffing agencies that are under contract in the state contract, their questions were, what do you want them to do fundamentally? What sort of skills do you need them? Do you want them to be good at Primavera or Project or any other tool? At just about the same time, I came to learn of all these other tools that I didn't know about. And it just raises the question, well, at least in my mind, let's understand what's out there what sort of options we may be able to put our hands on, because they are tool dependent or tool heavy versus project management heavy, and sort of go from there.
Are the firm, I think what we did discuss last time was that we would get a firm, but if we couldn't move quickly enough, we thought there might be some on a pre-qual list on a state contract. And if we could move quickly enough, we would get a firm that would have a larger sense of the abilities, of the capabilities, and could sort of teach us about the whole phenomenon of project management, as well as populate and manage the tool. And then, but if that couldn't be quick enough, we might fall back to a temp.
Well, let me make a distinction, make sure that we're understanding each other. The firms under state contract are really staffing agencies, and they can go get, just about anybody, frankly. Technical people who can do project management.
Those are the temp agencies.
Those are the
right.
temp agencies. To my knowledge, I don't know that there are project management firms under state contracts. I need to do that research to see if we can, bring somebody in quick from a firm perspective. Now, what we discussed last week or last time that we could get a temp agency to get somebody in, but before we do that, the question from those temp agencies were, what sort of tool do you want them to be good at? And well, we haven't decided that, and that's fundamentally the catch-22, or not the catch-22, the period that we are in terms of trying to decide where we need to go with this.
Well, I think we've sort of delegated this to you to do, so, but what you're hearing is, this concern, we need to get moving here, so if we, and so if we can get, if we want to have some demonstrations first, let's do it and do it quickly,
Yeah.
and then we'll get going to get a.
I don't want to leave with the impression that we're not moving on this.
Yeah.
I have installed software project in my computer. I have a draft of a schedule. I'm joining a call tomorrow relative to some of the milestones with some of our consultants that have already been discussed among them. The purpose of me joining that call is really to ascertain what the important milestones and just the rough dependencies are there. And I will be submitting that hopefully
Right.
for the next meeting. So there's progress on that.
Okay. Okay, and then we've got two hires in the pipeline, actually three, I guess, in the pipeline. And background checking is going on, and so hopefully maybe by next week, but certainly the week after, we should have a next tier of people. But we have agreed not to talk about anybody until the background checks are completed, but there are three hires going on quickly. Discussion of 3D, discussion of Gaming Commission internal policies. I think the biggest one, Commissioner Cameron, is background checks that you are looking into and looking about the tiering levels and so forth.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Being consistent with other gaming commissions, best practices, as well as looking at the governor's office's background investigation, the Attorney General's background investigation, we have come up with two levels of background investigations, which we think are appropriate at this time, depending on the level of the employee we'll be looking at. One is the higher level background investigation, which is comprehensive, and when I say that, we're talking about criminal checks, employment and education verification, tax, civil suits, personal information is verified, driving records, 7 years of addresses, spouse information, conflict of interest, complete financial investigations, business associations, professional licenses, ethics violation, a very, very complete background investigation, very timely to complete by the state police, but certainly appropriate for our higher level employees. And our employees we're looking to hire receptionists, some admin folks in the office. We're looking at still a comprehensive investigation, but it does not include so much of the spouse information, the years and years of address verification, business associates, professional licenses. So I'm comfortable with this tiered system at this point after reviewing others in this industry as well as in this state, that this is a policy we should adopt at this time for our employees that we're hiring. Now, both background investigations include a drug screen and fingerprinting.
Right.
Had a meeting this morning with a health resource organization that is on the state contract that conducts drug screening for a number of state agencies in the state. Had a very positive meeting, was impressed with their policies, their procedures. I think that we can quickly enter into a contract with this health resource laboratory in order to conduct the pre-employment drug screening that we're looking to do. And we're looking to implement the panel of drugs used by the state police here as well as the Boston Police Department.
By implement the panel of drug, I mean.
In other words, what we'd like them to screen for us.
Okay, right.
So we're looking at a similar panel that is very well tested and can stand up in court, and the reasons for testing those particular drugs make sense. So, as I said, that was a positive meeting, and they are on state contracts, so we can enter into a contract quickly with them. And I am, in the process of finalizing with the state police the ability to use one of their units to do our fingerprinting. There's some questions that we need to answer, but I believe that we can do that quickly also. So we will be prepared to have a thorough investigation to include these two steps with these new employees that we're looking to hire.
How do we determine which kind of drug testing? Is it urine testing? Is
We
it
are-
hair testing? Is it?
We are, the most common and the most defensible in court is a urine test for a drug screen. That's the most commonly used. Now, a hair test is more comprehensive, usually backed up with a urine test because of the ability to challenge it. I'm very comfortable with using a urine sample as a drug screen for our pre-employment purposes. And my experience, as well as the research we've done to date on this, I'm very comfortable using that as and it's the most widely used and the most accepted if challenged.
Any thoughts about that, or? Well, one other question. I don't know that we have discussed does the identification of any drug, in other words, if a person has a little marijuana in their test, does that disqualify? Is that the policy that we're adopting? Is that an absolute?
I believe the reason for a pre-employment drug screen is to make sure we're hiring folks that do not have a substance abuse issue, and I think that it's probably a road we don't want to go down to judge, we're going to hire you because you had this substance and we're not going to hire you with that substance. I think an illegal substance is an illegal substance, and we should be very cautious in our pre-employment screen, and a negative result. Again, we can implement a policy. Right now, what we're doing is identifying the proper resource to use for this test, the proper mechanism, and the state police, by the way, will be responsible for all test results. So we will not be getting that information directly to our office at this point. We're just not staffed to do it. So they will take responsibility for receiving test results and notifying us with one package of the results of the background, the fingerprint, as well as the drug screen.
Okay.
So to answer your question about what the policy should be, I think we should be looking at not hiring an individual who has a positive result from the
Right,
screen.
right. Okay.
Is that what other law enforcement agencies do? This is,
Well-
after all, with respect to marijuana, in an environment there where small amounts of marijuana have been decriminalized. I mean, it's still a civil offense, but is that what other law enforcement agencies do?
I'm
Do you know?
aware that Boston Police does not hire anyone if they've had a positive.
Of anything.
Correct.
That's right, nothing.
That is so. Now, many other agencies do not conduct, in fact, most other agencies do not conduct a drug screen with their non-sworn officers.
Right.
It's commonly used with sworn officers as well as a random test throughout a career. But this is a cautious step that we've taken. But to answer Commissioner McHugh's questions, the ones that do, that I'm aware of, do not hire an employee if they've had any kind of a positive test.
What is it, if you have small amounts of marijuana now in Massachusetts, what, is that a misdemeanor?
Well, it's
It's a civil infraction.
A civil infraction, what's that, like a parking ticket?
No, there's a fine.
Yeah,
you've still broken the law,
It is
but it's
broken
not.
the law. Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, I think we have a consensus here, but it seems to me, Commissioner McHugh, you may want to speak to this, but it seems to me we need to get this written down. This is a pretty important area, not only because of the legislative mandate, because it's also just because it's an important area.
Great.
This is something we ought to get drafted up into a form that we can actually look at.
We are in the process
Okay.
of doing that. I'm working with
Okay.
Commissioner Zuniga to put that into a policy form.
Okay. And is this the kind of thing, Commissioner McHugh, that either would require or that should, as a matter of policy, have public review?
Oh, I think this would be like all of our other policies,
So it's just-
Mr. Chairman. The regulations, we need to have
Right.
public process, and with some regulations, like the ones we're going to be talking about later today, we're going to have a notice of intent to make rules, to get general comments before we start writing the text of any rule. But this is an internal part of our employment policies, and I think we treat it like that. We
Right.
talk about it, it's a serious matter, an important matter, but then vote on it ourselves.
Okay. All right, so we will draft this up so we can see something in careful detail, but as a practical matter, I think as we're starting now, we've got 3 hires in the pipeline. We have tentatively agreed to do the tiering that you're talking about, and we obviously will go ahead with the drug testing, urine sample, and the fingerprinting for the people who are in the pipeline, even before we formally approve this policy. Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Zuniga, you were working on employment manual. Anything to report on that?
No, it's still a work in progress. I have drafted 2 chapters, mostly relative to employment and workplace policies. The first chapter is all about employment, where I see this policy of background checks that we were just talking about, where it could fit. Second chapter is about workplace policies, and others are about benefits and code of conduct, etc.
Right.
So I've done, let's just say, half of them from incorporating from different sources that we've talked about, life sciences, treasurer's office, and others.
Okay.
And that's still a work in progress.
Okay, great. Any other policies in the pipeline or anything that we're talking about? Okay. I think the speaking engagements ought to go down under item 8, but I've got, after our economic development forum on Thursday, I'm speaking that evening to the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission in Worcester, and on Tuesday, well, that's after our next meeting, okay. Any other outside engagements that are in the pipeline? Okay.
I have a question perhaps for, how do we, is it just a procedure for responding to invitations? When we get an invitation, sometimes it's assumed to be a personal invitation, but it's of course in the official capacity of being to this commission. Is it something that we should, I got an invitation recently. Do we need to talk about it here for the future? Or?
Well, what we've done for the time being, we've run everything by, well, we used to run them by Karen, because she had both a PR perspective and an ethics commission perspective. I think we should continue to run everything by Elaine. If there's any issue at all about who they are, who's in attendance, is there fundraising involved? You know, we got those parameters that we talked about 2 weeks ago, where the Ethics Commission was pretty clear about what we could do. But if there's any fuzziness at all, if it's anything other than very straightforward by the definition of that Ethics Commission opinion, I would say run it by the Ethics Commission, or maybe run it by Commissioner McHugh first, and if he thinks it ought to go to the Ethics Commission, I think we sort of use Commissioner McHugh as our first line of defense, and then if we really need to look at it hard, get the but as a practical matter, Elaine's is pushing to get us out there a lot, and thinks that we ought to be out there as much as we can, so it's definitely encouraged. But there are a lot of little subtleties about, you know, who's there, who's the sponsor, is it a fundraising event, et cetera. How are we positioned? And the littlest misstep can be an issue, so I'd err on the side of tremendous caution. Anything else to say on that, Commissioner?
No, I think that one of the policies that we need to work out with Elaine's help is that she's doing a tremendous job now, doing a lot of things on a lot of fronts, is to get the standardized protocol for responding to speaking invitations, and just have some kind of setup for that everybody feeds into. If we get individual ones, it goes to her to see if it meets those criteria. And that's the first step. That takes a lot of if we have a policy like that, then that takes a lot of the discretion out of things, and everything's above board is in terms of where we go and where we don't go, and why we go and why we don't go.
Yeah.
So.
The Ethics Commission is incredibly quick, and, you know, they turn the thing right, so it's not a big imposition to turn to them. Either Deirdre or Karen Nober are very, very quick to turn things around. Okay, I think the Racing Commission may take a while, and rather than do that, let's skip to 5A, the consultant status report, because I want to make sure to give Kathy O'Toole a chance to do her thing and also get out of here on time. There are two-step process for this project. Topic 1, Topic 5A. First, Commissioner McHugh and the consultants have been talking about a process by which we'll track the development of regulations, of processes, and track the flow of the project. Commissioner, do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Let me just deal with it at a very high level, and then I'm going to circulate a memorandum. Kathy O'Toole and I and Kristen met earlier this week to talk about that, and I've got a memorandum that we've now agreed on, and I'll circulate that after the meeting. But basically, the process is designed to ensure that we stay on track, but also assure that we consider things, because the flow is really going to increase here soon, that we consider things that are ready for consideration. So with that end in mind, the process at a very high level is essentially this. Every week we'll get a new overall chart that shows where we are on a variety of things. Now, that's very plastic. It may change day to day because of the speed with which the consultants are moving. But we'll get that on Monday. We'll circulate it. We typically won't use it at the meeting, but it'll provide background for the things we do talk about. Then each week, the deliverables that are ready to be delivered will be sent to me for initial screening. And I'll take a look at them and decide whether or not we need to do a little bit more work on them before we circulate them. And if so, we'll talk about the work that needs to be done and get that work done. And if they are ready for circulation, they'll be circulated by Monday at noon, which is the protocol we've all agreed on, so that we have enough time to think about them and read them and consider them before we talk about them at a meeting here. And I'll do that. and we'll proceed in that fashion. The information that's on those weekly updated charts, Kristen can upload into project management if that's the tool we ultimately decide to use, or some other tool with which she's familiar. If we use a different tool, then we'll have to arrange a different process to upload that information so that we stay current. And that's essentially the way we'll proceed. The overall schedule looks like we will be into a regulation-heavy mode, for want of a better and more precise description, sometime in mid-August, early mid-August. And that's a lengthy process that will culminate probably in the mid to late fall. So by August, we should be in the regulation reviewing and the regulation approving a status. There were 3 deliverables that Kathy mentioned last week that I looked at. One is a draft, one's a memorandum with respect to the RFA 1 process, and that one we're going to do some more work on. And then there is another one that is ready for prime time for us to consider, but I didn't circulate it by yesterday for a variety of reasons. So we'll consider that next week along with the other things that we get. So at a very high level, that's the way we thought we would manage it, subject to any considerations or thoughts that any of you have.
And when you distribute ones that are ready for prime time, they're the only feedback loop will be at our meetings, right?
Yes, yes, that's right. But they'll have had that preliminary screening, and they'll be ready for discussion. There may be reasons that we don't want to approve it, but we're not going to wait until it's a slam dunk. There's still going to be questions and things that we discuss here, and modifications of processes that may in some cases be different alternatives. But at least the obvious questions that are obvious to me will have been thought through and addressed, and then we'll take up consideration of them then. That's the idea, is to avoid discussing at these meetings things that could be more fleshed out, could be clearer, could be more well-developed before we actually come to the process and point of discussing them at this meeting, to keep this on track.
Right. Great.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a way to obtain in advance just the potential deliverables, maybe a week in advance, or as you are discussing them with the consultants, we're having Monday for tomorrow, we're looking at the final draft about the deliverables, but could that Monday be at least, could we get information as to what would be in the pipeline for that following week?
We can do this any way we want. In other words, we could get the deliverable that was ready for our discussion, deliver it on a Monday, say, and consider it the next Monday, if that's the way we want to go.
I wasn't suggesting that. I was just trying to get my head around what may be down the pipeline, and it's only a week. Not even in draft form, but only in bullet format.
I think Kathy's prepared to talk about that.
Great. I'm getting ahead of ourselves here.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
yeah. Report.
That's sort of just the overview piece, Kathy. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. So my name is Kathleen O'Toole. I'm here representing the consultants, Spectrum Gaming and Michael and Carol, and here to provide an update. I think in response to Commissioner Zuniga's comments, we will, every week we'll talk about the deliverables, and we'll also talk about the work that's in the pipeline that you can expect in the coming week or weeks.
Are the deliverables on the work plan?
Yes.
So when you're distributing that each week, we'll see it out there on the work plan, and eventually it'll be on the Gantt chart too.
Yeah, we're submitting that work plan to Commissioner McHugh every Monday as well.
All right. Okay, great.
So again, the deliverables provided this week, promised last week, provided this week, were the list of regulations required for the RFA Phase 1 process, the recommendations for the near-term hires, and also the scope of licensing memo. So those are with Commissioner McHugh now. And the team initiated several new activities this week. First, they've started to review and document anti-money laundering provisions and required compliance with applicable federal regulations. They're developing table of organization options to review and discuss with the Commission. They're also commencing the drafts of the actual Phase 1 regulations, and they're also drafting the Massachusetts supplemental application form. The team continues to work on a number of other activities that were previously discussed with the Commission. That includes, while again finalizing the proposed timeline around the RFA Phase 1 and related regulations, reviewing the multi-jurisdictional background form, and determining what Massachusetts-specific adjustments have to be made to that. Documenting and providing best practices commentary around requirements set forth by the Act, including all the mandatory hires, revenue sources, and the hearings and appeals process. They've identified the agencies requiring MOUs, and we're continuing to work with Anderson and Krieger to integrate their legal interpretations into our work. So deliverables that can be expected this coming week are the draft memo detailing revenue sources, and also the draft memo detailing mandatory job positions. This is not only near-term, but longer-term as well. And then either this week or next week, already underway are draft memos detailing the anti-money laundering provisions and required compliance, and also a draft memo detailing confidentiality requirements that will need to be addressed with regulations. So those are the projects that have been completed in draft form, and also the ones that are in the pipeline this week.
Great.
So we'll do our call tomorrow. We do a consultant's call to the day following the Commission meeting, so that everyone is on the same page. And we'll do the call tomorrow. Commissioner Zuniga is participating in that, and I'm sure we'll meet with different members of the Commission and have further discussions about some of these issues during the course of the week.
Would you reiterate the three deliverables, just so that people hear and the public can hear again the three things that Commissioner McHugh now has?
Yes. First of all, a list of the regulations that will be required for the RFA Phase 1 process. That was at one point the pre-qualification process. That's correct. The second is a memo recommending near-term hires, people that the consultants feel are necessary to support the Commission's work in the very near term. And the final is the scope of licensing memo, and that addresses the individuals who and corporations that will actually have to participate in the pre-qualification and qualification process. And
are those all three are ready for you, or are those ready?
And I'm going to circulate them.
The three of them.
I'm going to circulate them to us. Great. One is I've suggested to Kathy that we need to do a little bit more work on. One's a draft, so it's still a work in progress, and the third one's ready for discussion. So we'll do that next week.
I think we'll either have a follow-up meeting or a phone call with Commissioner McHugh to address some of the issues in that particular memo.
Right. And then that'll be ready, I'm sure, by next week as well. We may not have to make any changes. We're just
correct.
And you have a tentative now deadline, I think, in mind for a target date for getting the Phase 1 request for application forms out.
Yes.
And that is?
Well, again, it's a fairly elaborate time scale that I discussed with Commissioner McHugh this morning.
And I think that it's fair to say that time frame is mid-fall. And I think over the next couple of weeks, Mr. Chairman, that's going to become more clear as we move forward to see to see how these regulations are coming
The
along.
the regulations are actually being drafted now. We hope that the regulations will be completed in draft form by the consultants in early July. We're hoping that it will give the commission at least 3 weeks. We can iterate, with the commission on the draft regulations. And we hope that by the end of July, those regulations will be finalized. But then there are public notice requirements and hearing requirements that will go through August and September.
And that's the difficulty in picking a precise date right now, because the regulation promulgation process requires a period of public hearings. And one can assume that with all the thought and consideration that's gone into the draft regulations, we're going to sail through the public comment period with not a great deal of changes. But that's only an assumption.
Right.
And if we do have a substantive comment, it may take some rewriting and some reworking, some rethinking. And because these are all interconnected,
Right.
that may extend the process somewhat. But the focus is to have this process start at the beginning of August, and then in the mid-fall to finish, if we can move
Right.
forward without any unanticipated delays.
Okay. I think this is really helpful, and I think for the public to know that there's, that there is a statutory or a legal regulatory process that we have to adhere to. It's not just the commission doing its own work. It's not just the commission taking somebody else's regs and Xeroxing them and putting them out. We have to not only think it through how it applies to Massachusetts, but go through a rigorous promulgation protocol that is prescribed by the law. So it's an important thing to understand, and just in the way the process is working here. But the second thing, just to clarify, is that at the end of this request for application phase 1, or at the beginning of the request for application phase 1, mid-fall we're targeting, we will ask anybody who's interested in being a bidder to come to us formally and pay in some form or other. We haven't worked this out yet, but as a practical matter, pay the application fee, which is in the legislation, of $400,000. And from that point forward, it's our supposition at this point that the bidders will become applicants. Once you pay your application fee and get into that phase 1 review, which is basically of your financial integrity and your personal and corporate integrity, you are an applicant from that point forward. So that the public will begin to see, without any ambiguity at all, who really is in the game for what sites in what region. And I think this is great. You guys have been tremendously helpful in getting this together for us.
I have a couple of questions. These regulations, as they're being conceptualized right now, are they envisioned to be one set of regulations for all phases that we have been discussing, or is it only for phase 1?
These regulations are for to support the RFA Phase 1 process.
Phase 1 process?
Yeah, the commission's made it clear that that should be our priority, so the consultants are working on those regulations. We'll have them to the commission in draft form in early July. It will allow for approximately 3 weeks to iterate with the commission, finalize those regulations, and then, as the chairman and Commissioner McHugh have indicated, I believe it's a 21-day notice requirement prior to a hearing, and then hearing process. And so it will be, even best case, and we've really accelerated these, it will be September, October before the hearing process is.
Great. So it's fair to assume that another regulation process will kick in sometime later. It doesn't have to be after everything is finished, but we will subsequently have to start thinking about regulations for phase 2 and so on.
Actually, the consultants have already started to compile that list as well, but we've received the message clearly from all of you that the RFA Phase 1 process should be the priority.
Great. Any other questions or?
No, but the Commissioner Zuniga's point is an important one, because part of the reason for doing this is that we can begin with the investigation and begin with the processing of applicants at the same time we're developing the substantive regulations, rather than waiting for the whole period to develop the qualifications and the substantive regulations and then begin the process. And in that fashion, we shave time off of the overall process. So that's the way this is designed to work, and one
Which
of
is
the
great.
benefits that we'll get from it.
Right, which is terrific. What, where in the process, if you know yet, we have different ways we can actually do the background checking of the applicants. Once an applicant is in, we're going to do this financial and integrity background checks. We haven't decided yet who's going to do that. Where is that in the pipeline, that decision-making process? Are we gonna-
That,
Actually, it's my understanding that Commissioner Cameron has been exploring different options for the background investigations. So
and
For
the
the-
indeed-
consultants have had some discussions with her about that.
Yes.
And
Okay.
indeed, the memorandum dealing with the early hires that I'll distribute after this meeting talks about that, at least in general terms, as well. So
Okay.
that the consultants have already thought about that, discussed it with Commissioner Cameron. So
Okay.
that's been considered.
That's going along in
That's
parallel.
going along in
Yes.
parallel.
In my research on background investigations for commission members, I did speak with our consultants on.
Commission employees.
Commission employees. I did speak with our consultants on best practices in other jurisdictions. And we did start a conversation about the next phase, which will be the background investigation for our applicants.
Okay. Because in the early stage, when we had this conversation with Carol, Michael and Carol, and Fred Gushin, they distributed some standard forms that have been used elsewhere and suggested, and I think it makes a lot of sense, that to the maximum extent possible, use standard forms, and probably we'll talk about the extent to which we can rely on, or not, the extent to which we can rely on use of those standard forms by other jurisdictions in the recent past. But I had a lot of questions, and at some point, I'm looking forward to an opportunity of talking about those standard forms whenever that comes up in the process.
Both of the consulting firms have had extensive experience in conducting these types of investigations. And,
Right.
Eventually it's, you'll have in-house personnel to assist. But I think we all envision a path where consultants assist the state police and in-house personnel until such time that you have your own capacity to conduct these investigations.
Right. Great. Anything else on this?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, back to item 4, I think, Racing Division. Commissioner Cameron, do you want to give us a general status report?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Great.
As we're all aware, our racing consultant has been conducting a review of racing procedures in the Commonwealth. She continues that review of identifying what the practices are here and a comparison of what best practices are in other jurisdictions. So at some point during this racing season, I look forward to making recommendations to the full commission about, a strategic plan and the kinds of changes that may be necessary, a timeline, a budget, all of those things. And the part that I like is that we are continuing on with the process as is until we're prepared to really take this and make the changes necessary. There may be a couple of issues that we need to handle during this racing season. For example, we have an issue with an employee who has some significant responsibilities in the lab, who has some health issues. So there may be, we're exploring options to that as we speak. So we may have to make some changes as we move forward during this racing season. We have our first racing division meeting scheduled to address pending track matters, as well as I will be presiding as the hearing officer for appeals, which have been submitted since the State Racing Commission was disbanded. They had their last meeting in May. I will have a meeting in June, and that's scheduled for June 21st, right here in this building, to address those appeals and other pending track matters. And again, the process will be, I will have recommendations for the full commission to ratify as a result of those monthly hearings. I was.
Recommendations on the appeal processes.
Correct.
This is not your best practice.
No, no,
This
no,
is
no.
the-
This is now,
yeah,
we've
right.
moved on to this
Right.
meeting that will be held monthly. And this is the meeting that was traditionally held by the State Racing Commission members. I will be holding those meetings and making recommendations. I was made aware yesterday of an issue with regard to the Racing Development Trust Fund. And there's some issues on decisions the commission will have to make, steps to, so that we have enough money to cover all operating expenses through FYI 13. And what I've asked, Mr. Chair, is that for the CFO for the Office of Consumer Affairs, Mr. Gray Holmes, to come today and explain those options to the commission, to assist us in making a decision of moving forward with racing operation business, which we are now responsible for. So that completes my report, but I know that Mr. Holmes is here to give that briefing at this time.
Before we get to that topic, which is a big one, I'm wondering whether things are moving quickly enough, whether we should designate Commissioner Cameron, either formally or informally, to go ahead and make changes as she sees fit, if she has to do them in a time frame which is so quickly that we haven't had a chance to talk about them, subject to you obviously coming back and reporting to us where you stand. Does that make sense? I mean, I think we have confidence in her ability to make the distinctions between what needs to be considered first and what needs to happen quickly. But if there are things that need to happen quickly, I think we need to designate to her as if she were a CEO of this organization to make changes and then report back.
That would be helpful, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I have one comment which is in agreement with what you are pointing out, and to make sure that that includes decisions that have to do with finances of the racing division. So
Like the
that-
topic we're going to talk about.
Like the topic we're going to talk
Okay,
about.
right, okay.
So that, you know, as the presiding officer and head of the division, she also has the authority to have financial related operations.
Okay, good, that's a good addition. Commissioner McEwen, any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's an expeditious way to proceed.
Right.
And so I would move that the commission designate Commissioner Cameron as its agent to make such changes and take such steps as are necessary to assure that the racing activities of which this commission has jurisdiction are maintained in a stable operation through the end of the racing season, a stable operating condition through the end of this racing season, and that she report periodically to the commission on her activities and on the tasks and issues that she deems appropriate for this commission to approve in advance of her action.
Sounds good to me. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay? The ayes have it. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Enjoy. All right, Mr. Holmes.
Good afternoon.
Aye.
Good afternoon.
Do you want Mr. Holmes to just sort of take it from the top? And we have this memorandum,
Yes,
but
as I say, I was made aware of